it is controversial in that sense. But like with any technology, it's a new trend, and we're going to have to all work out how it fits GBS and how it fits education, how it fits our individual roles, etc.
Hello and welcome to SSO Next.
On this podcast, you'll find conversations that fuel the future of shared services.
Join your hosts, Barbara Hodge,
Sally Fletcher,
and Jordan Mullins as they dig into what's next beyond the buzzwords in the shared services and GBS industry.
Each week, one of us sits down with a market leader to highlight the twists and turns of their career and how they got to their current leadership role.
The role real-time data plays in driving GBS decisions for maximum value and impact.
And innovative strategies for 2023 that redefine service delivery.
Tune in every Monday to get the inside scoop of who is doing what to push the GBS envelope.
Good morning and welcome to SSO Next. So today on the podcast, we're joined by Phil Searle, founder of Chasey Partners. Phil founded Chasey Partners back in 2006. He's a globally recognized and award-winning expert in business transformation, shared services, and intelligent automation. And he's led numerous projects in both the private and public sector. He regularly speaks at conferences and events around the globe, including many of SSON's shared services events. In fact, his first SSON conference was back in 1998. I didn't even know they did conferences back then, Phil. Chasey Partners was majority acquired by QX Global Group in early 2022, and the combined business today offers end-to-end operating model and digital transformation services to organizations across the globe, including global business services and intelligent automation solutions. So I can think of no one better to talk to us about the topic of transforming GBS with generative AI. So generative AI has been a buzzword on everyone's lips for the last few months, but as with any new solution, the more it's talked about, the more the conversation is diluted and the more it becomes difficult to distinguish fact from fiction and marketing spiel from reality. So I wanted to invite someone on the podcast that could talk to us about what generative AI could mean for GBS specifically and what we need to be thinking about in order to take advantage of this fantastic opportunity. So welcome to the podcast, Phil. Let's start with the basics. In brief, what is generative AI?
So first up, thank you very much for asking me for this podcast today, Sally. It's great to be with you. We were just catching up a second ago on the last few years, right, Sally? And yeah, 1998. I know it's scary when I think about that, but that was the first event I went to in I think it was in Brussels or Amsterdam or something. But anyway, generative AI. To get to the point. So actually. Generative AI, I mean, I've only been learning about it myself, quite frankly, for the last few months as well. It's the latest and the trend I would associate with intelligent automation, or what some people call the fourth industrial revolution, in terms of technology and the fusion, the synergy of technologies and the rapid advancement of new tools and technologies. Well, generative AI is one of them. So, I mean, to answer your question, what exactly is it? And that's a great question. And why is it different? Right. So generative AI really is a new type of artificial intelligence technology. And what it does is it is able to produce through its technology various types of original content. So original content, the key word there is original. And that includes things like text, video, pictures, imagery, audio, and even synthetic data. So how does it do it? I mean, again, if you look into some of the technical aspects of it, and it basically uses what are called neural networks, which you may or may not have heard of, which identify patterns and structures within existing data pools, data sets, and they generate new content, which is entirely unique. So one of the cool things about this technology is it produces unique, something that's never been done before. And effectively, it does that through teaching itself how to process data in a way that is like the way the human brain would do it. So that's why it's called generative AI and why it's in the latest technology. It's really, underneath it, it's using a machine learning type of process called deep learning that uses interconnected technologies and neurons and tries to remember the way the human brain works. So this is why it's so exciting, and this is why it's also so controversial in how it does it. So it uses this, and it can do it without explicit instructions, and can do pattern creation as opposed to traditional AI, which is just pattern recognition. Now, to be honest, it's not brand new technology in that sense. Actually, generative AI to some degree has been around for a while in things like chatbots, which you may remember. But there's been late developments more recently that have really accelerated that around things like generative adversarial networks, or GANs as they're called, which has really done a leap forward, enable this technology to allow users to create convincing, as I said, new, original, authentic image, video, content, audio, data sets, its analysis, etc., that's not been available before. And why it's really exciting for GBS is it's not going to, like so many technologies, like whether that be actually back in the day, some of those traditional technology enablers, or more recently in RPA, it's not going to, overnight change the world, but it's going to be an additional and exciting new technology in your, what I would call your intelligent automation toolkit. And so you need to then consider, I know we're going to talk about that, how it can be used effectively within GBS. And I know we're going to talk about that. So hopefully I've answered the technical question and what it is in a definition. But any other thoughts or comments on that?
No, that makes complete sense to me. And it's fascinating because for years in the conferences that I've produced, people have been saying, oh, my shared services employees are really worried about RPA taking their jobs or IA taking their jobs. And I was always like, that's so ridiculous. Why would you have that fear? But with generative AI, for the first time, I was like, someone could take my job as a conference producer, producing unique content that you just talked about. And for the first time, I kind of understood that fear. And I was like, oh, goodness, I need to step up my game when it comes to generative AI. So it's so interesting. I've not seen anything like it. My brother uses it to write his kind of reports in the style of different things. So you can ask it, write a work report in the style of the Queen or something like that. So something to try if you want to have some fun as well.
Yeah. So a lot of it's unknown, really, honestly, isn't it, right now, Sally, and what it's going to do. It is. And that's what I talked about earlier. It is controversial in that sense. But like with any technology, it's a new trend, and we're going to have to all work out how it fits GBS and how it's going to fit education, how it fits our individual roles, etc. I think some of the controversy and potentially fear is because it mimics the human brain, is what we talked about earlier on, in how it thinks. Is it going to take on some of those more, to your point, is it going to take on some of those more higher profile job levels that haven't necessarily been impacted before? The only thing I would say is, as you said, when you think about RPA and other technology automations around process for many, many years, which have been going back decades and decades, they haven't replaced a lot of jobs. They've really changed the work structure, right? And how work gets done and the sort of skill sets you need. So I'm assuming that's going to be the same case here, but it will be very interesting to see that. What it absolutely will change is the way work gets done, how it gets done, the benefits, and what skill sets people need to perform in workplace and in GBS. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, for sure. I see every year someone saying, do more with less, do more with less. And, it's getting how much more can we do with how much less? And I think generative AI is really going to be able to help on so many different processes and tasks that the GBS provides. And let's hone in on the GBS specifically. What do you see as the opportunities that generative AI can provide for global business services?
Yeah, so obviously that's the multi-million-dollar, multi-personal question around GBS. I sort of touched on this already, but let's just remember that AI, artificial intelligence in general, and generative AI is just one, right, of a layer or a stream of potential tools in the end-to-end intelligent automation space. In fact, I often talk about, am I wrong, right, whatever, but I think about technology in sort of three buckets. I think about what I call traditional ERP, like the Oracles and the SAPs and the Microsoft Dynamics, et cetera, which have been around forever and they improve, et cetera, and they're still core systems. Then I think about what I call the mid-range technology enablers, things like case management, things like workflow, things like document management, things like automated reconciliations, etc. There is overlap between some of these. And a third category, which is intelligent automation. And intelligent automation includes things like RPA, which you mentioned, machine learning, document management, some of the latest IDP, intelligent document management tools, which I'll come back to later, and artificial intelligence, and now generative AI. Okay, so just to remember, it is one of the latest. So in terms of what it can be leveraging GBS. Well, the answer is, oh my God, it could be used in so many areas as you start to think about it. And I've already touched on one, and I'm going to lead with what I call the old chestnut, Sally, which is intelligent document processing. So I've been hearing about and involved with and seeing scanning and archiving and OCR technologies for most of those 25 years we just were talking about, with OCR promising to, save the world from paper and document retrieval and approval, etc. The truth is, the technology sort of evolved over the years, and it is there. Absolutely, the scanning technology and OCR technology is great, but it's never been as good, completely seamless, lights out processing. Well, generative AI now actually, through a combination of leveraging optical character recognition, I just mentioned, natural language processing, or NLP, as you sometimes hear it called, and things like computer vision technologies, actually enables you to significantly improve the success rates, which is really what we're talking about from IDP. Plus, on top of that, IDP, being intelligent document processing, don't want to use too many acronyms, but it's now got the opportunity to further leverage that data captured through IDP and use it for other uses around analysis and decision making. So it's really cool in the IDP space, the intelligent document management processing space, which is directly relevant for GBS. So that's just one. Then we've got things like, again, these have been around for a while, but customer service and chatbots. Intelligent chatbots have been around for a while, but now with generative AI, these chatbots can go beyond what I would call the limitations of those traditional chatbots by leveraging the same sort of things, AI, natural language processing, machine learning, and they offer today more sophisticated and, again, human-like interactions which become aware of context and are more personalized and are able to handle more complex tasks. So there's a real opportunity around the whole customer services, call center, support desk, help desk, value-adding services. And in some of these sort of retail CPG type of businesses, obviously they've got a real opportunity around cross-selling and customer interactions, etc. So that's another one. A third one would be supply chain and logistical areas around demand forecasting, management of inventories, route optimization, those sort of things. And that's really a big deal out there in the world as you get into those areas of supply chain. Some companies, for example, are using generative AI to generate algorithms for demand forecasting, waste reduction, inventory management, transportation management, and actually reducing cost and emissions of transport networks and things like that. So that's pretty cool. Another area is basically personalization of interactions with the customer service center. And actually, one of the things that I would say shared services and GBS has long aimed for but suffered from is the customer service area, right? What makes the shared services and GBS fundamentally different is the fact you treat your internal customer as if they were an external customer, right? So what is it about this new technology that can help that? Well, it can help the customer service experience. So that's really important. A couple of other things I know we don't have all day, but content generation is huge. So you can produce documentation for GBS, including marketing documentation, and some of the email campaigns and ads and communications, change management, that can all be helped significantly through generative AI. And then you've got a couple of other quick areas: language translation and localization, fundamental to GBS, operating across boundaries, especially from centralized locations, and things like automated, internal control, detection, fraud prevention, those sort of things, which generative AI can hugely improve. So I think I gave you about 7 or 8 examples there. But there's a few. Yeah,
that's so much food for thought because, it's going to help shared service. A lot of them we know are moving up the value chain, going from transactional to value-added services and integrating much more advanced services such as customer service and customer experience into their shared service centers.
Exactly.
And, for a long time, that automation was kind of prohibited with these more advanced and more intelligent almost services. But now generative AI can kind of take that on board and include those within the automation and push them even further up the maturity curve. So I think it's really exciting.
Exactly. One of the things about GBS, forget generative AI for a second, but GBS, Global Business Services, one of the things that's been happening is the fusion or pulling together of the front, middle, and back office, right? So shared services is far more involved in what you might call a middle office than it ever used to be. And that's part of this moving up the value chain and actually the linking together of the supply chain and value chain. And that's been happening before generative AI. One of the cool things about generative AI is going to really help that integration and that moving up the value chain that you just mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about how it can kind of go the next step when it comes to things like intelligent document processing. It almost sounds like it's bridging the value gap that was missing, because a lot of people used to complain that maybe traditional RPA tools didn't kind of get to the level that the marketing spiel had promised. But it sounds like with generative AI, you can take it to that next level and kind of get the value that you were hoping for in your IA implementations.
For sure. I mean, just to reflect on a point I made a little bit earlier, is that RPA isn't going to go away from this again. It's about using the right tools for the right uses, of course. And a lot of the RPA vendors out there, as I'm sure you know, they've been sort of moving up their own value chains into machine learning, et cetera. So it's about integration, but it isn't necessarily about replacing. So RPA will stay, although like everything else, it will evolve, and its relevance will become changed. And it actually will, as I said, it will start merging some of these technologies together. So it's at the end of the day, it's all about improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the delivery, right? So that includes processing, that includes value content, that includes data points, reports, etc. And that's why generative AI adds a new component to that.
Yeah, really cool. Now, I know our audience will be desperate for me to ask you this question because it comes up all the time, and it's about the risk factors, of course. So, what are the risk factors people need to be aware of when using generative AI?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of honestly potential risk factors when you're thinking about it. One of the interesting ones, of course, is it's right off the bat, it's a new technology. Okay, so any new technology needs to go through an appropriate, I'd say IT, but technology landscape assessment and how it's going to operate within your landscape, within your infrastructure, within your framework, within your security, within your whether it be on-site or off-prem. So you're going to have all the key parties, third-party suppliers involved in making sure that you manage that. And I know that, some of the recent surveys are saying that senior IT leaders are really, for obvious reasons, looking into that. So you've got to manage the risks around your whole IT infrastructure and how it works together. Getting more specific about some of the other areas, one of the concerns around generative AI has been copyright issues and patent infringement. And you've got to be real careful with that, because through its content, it goes out to the large data pools, or as you've seen, large data sets, and it will make decisions or recommendations and produce content, et cetera, new, unique content based on that. Well, there is a danger from doing that it actually potentially breaches copyright or IP. So you need to be careful of that and make sure that all the educators, et cetera, have effectively understand the risks of copy and plagiarism, et cetera, within some of their own tools and et cetera, to make sure we don't have that. I know that's happened in some of our higher education already. They've had some risk around plagiarism, so we need to be careful of that. So breaching copyright, breaching IP, very important risk that we need to manage. Another area of risk is you've got to be careful about what I call false certainty. So just because it's produced by generative AI doesn't mean it's correct, right? So when you're having a conversation with a human or a person, they might say, well, I think this might be subject to within this framework. This is my view. There are, you know what I mean? There's context and established gaps around that, effectively guardrails.
You have to have some critical thinking when you're looking at the result.
Well, not exactly. You have to have critical thinking, and you have to be careful to understand that the answers aren't unequivocal. And another thing is, you may have heard of this, is what is called hallucination, where the tool actually makes stuff up. So you need to be careful. You need to be able to explain where the sources of the truth is. You need to be able to support it, to your point. And you've got to be careful of bias. Again, like any tool, there could be innate bias depending on the data sets and how that data set is questioned and queried. So there are all sorts of bias you've got to be careful about, as I'm sure you see on the news and today operations and ESG and of course all sorts of things around HR requirements and content. So there is potential bias you need to be careful of. And one last thing, and this is something that sometimes gets missed a bit, but is also important, especially in the wider context, is the environmental impact, because blockchain had this issue with a lot of issue around use of significant amounts of energy. Well, the same applies with generative AI, and it can lose a significant amount of energy. So we need to take that into account and how we leverage that as part of our own environmental assessment and how we treat that within our overall GBS structures and business in general. So that's another risk you need to be thinking about. So overall, I would say there are potential risks and ethical considerations that you need to consider while looking at generative AI. But the same applies with so many other technologies. And there are exciting applications for all of these that are being made huge strides in all sorts of models. So again, it's understand and then leverage and consider appropriately, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really good kind of comprehensive overview of the risks for sure. And I love that you included environmental issues because, of course, ESG is becoming kind of a key factor and key focus for shared services. So it's really good to kind of consider that with any new technology for sure.
Right.
So a couple more questions, if you have a few more minutes. How does generative AI fit into a typical GBS solutions catalog? So you mentioned it already, but if you could just expand a little further, will it replace other types of AI tools? Will it kind of augment or sit alongside them? How does that work?
Yeah, so it will, over time, of course, it will replace some, but for sure, not all. And it will definitely sit along, I think I mentioned this a little bit, alongside other AI tools and also other technologies. ERP isn't going away because of this. Some of the other technology tools in that middle space that I mentioned earlier are not going away. What will happen, what's the key is how do they work together and how do they leverage each other effectively? And that's actually a question on IA tools in general. What you need to be is understand why same rules apply, right? You need to understand what the problem is, why you're trying to solve it, and where you think generative AI can do that better than maybe traditional RPA, or better than some standard Lean Six Sigma process tool, or better than some process elimination tool, or better than standard ERP. So what is it about generative AI that is specific to this tool? So to answer your question, it's going to sit alongside. I've seen some comments out there about setting up a generative AI COE, Center of Expertise. And my answer I wouldn't set up a separate one. I would definitely set it up within your intelligent automation COE, Center of Expertise. So that, in other words, sit alongside RPA, machine learning, chatbots, and all these other tools and technologies, and then work out its place within there. And over time, in a way, it will work itself out. So where it fits in your own GBS and within your own technology will work itself out, but by how successful it is at delivering on those outputs and those requirements that I mentioned. So I don't see it replacing. I definitely see it sitting alongside in the short term. I would see it needs to be integrated in your COE and then operated similar to the way other intelligent automation tools have done, and then see what happens. I think we're all sort of seeing what happens to some degree as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've seen a couple of our members, and I think met one of them at Lisbon this year that was talking about mindful automation. So the right tool for the right process at the right time. And I thought that was such a good way of putting it, and really relates back to what you're saying about not just kind of slapping on any old IA, but having a careful assessment of the options with the right process, with the right time, with the right experience that you've got in the company, or maybe working with someone like Chasey to help assess those things.
Exactly, Sally. And I mentioned before, the approach is not going to be that much different in terms of your assessment, your roadmap, your business case, your value. And then, of course, you need to think about, I mentioned earlier, technology footprint, technology landscape integration. Then you need to think about how you're going to deploy this, which includes obviously training, change management, skill set management, of course. One of the really exciting things about generative AI, as opposed to more traditional AI, is the user, as you've seen with ChatGPT, can immediately start using it, which is exciting, but also dangerous. I mean, in my own firm, Chasey Partners, we obviously do analysis of things all the time. We're consultants. Back to your point earlier on, Sally, about roles in the future. And we've got to be careful, because you don't know a situation where people start saying, "Oh, make a decision between," as an example, just use an example. What's the decision between 3 different alternative tools or 3 different platforms? And you just throw it into generative AI and pump out the response and then publish that. Well, one, there's no value in doing that from yourself as a human, as a person, as a consultant. There's no value in doing that. So two, you need to still read it for all the reasons that we talked about earlier around biases and context and framework, everything you were saying as well, Sally, around that knowledge part of the person. That doesn't go away. And then thirdly, you need to make it relevant. It needs to be relevant to the circumstances to which you're applying it. So in other words, there still needs to be intelligence on top of the intelligence. You want to see what I'm saying? And that's going to be critical as we move forward with using this tool.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I could talk to you all day about this topic. It's fascinating, but sadly, that's what we've got time for. So I want to thank you so much for joining us on SSO Next. And to hear more from Chasey, and to our listeners, to hear more from Chasey and to speak to Phil on the subject of generative AI or on any other GBS topic for that matter, you can meet that at SSON's Shared Service and Outsourcing Week conference in Las Vegas, which is taking place on the 11th or 14th of September. So you can find Phil there. Otherwise, you can listen out for their next podcast episode, which will be released slightly later on this year on another shared services trending topic. So thank you once again, Phil.
Thanks, Sally. Appreciate it. And enjoy the conversation.
If you're enjoying SSO Next, do us a solid and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us rank better on podcast platforms, and it gets seen by more amazing folks like you. Thank you, and